Hello and welcome to our third session of the day of the Continuous Improvement Summit. We're going to be hosting a fireside chat on building continuous improvement into digital tools. This is a fantastic session, I think, to continue the conversation on CI. We started today with Takeda's top 20 insight into how to get value out of continuous improvement. We have lots of questions about making it a cultural making it embedded into organizational culture. And then we kind of continued with that fireside chat into making a culture of continuous improvement, where we actually, a lot of the questions were around how to, how to ensure that they were building and being monitored and measured and valued so that and drive value out of those CI programs. And so I think that today this conversation with digital tools is really going to help us continue that conversation of measuring value. So what we're going to do is I'm going to mention that we do have CPE eligibility for those of you who are in the US with CPE credits to attend this year. You can get 0.6 CPEs by watching this session, watching the full 28 minutes, watching the webinar live, voting in the polls, as well as voting and clicking two of the attendance checks to obtain your certificate at the end. You click on the yellow CPE widget located in the bottom right-hand side of the console. I want to add as well that for those of you who are joining us for the first time today, you can connect with our speakers by clicking their LinkedIn buttons and continuing the conversation there. You can download some of the resources available. We have a number of live events, or we also have some downloadable digital white papers that people can view in order to continue their understanding. So what I want to mention as well is that we're going to begin our first poll so that way I can hear from our speakers while people vote. So our first speaker of the day is Bojan Bujak. He's the Director of Business Process Management at Canadian Bearings. Our second speaker is Tony Levy, the Director of Product Marketing with Skan. Bojan, would you like to share a little bit about your background and your work with digital tools and CI?
Sure, I'll go with a creative intro. I'm a corporate doctor with two specializations. One is performance radiologist and another one is improvement surgeon. And what I really do is do roles in transformation, process improvement, project and program management, and org change management. Most of my experience comes from supply chain between UPS and FedEx. I also worked in financial industry, utilities, military, and manufacturing. I'll pass it over to you, Tony.
Thank you, Bojan, and Jordan. Welcome, everybody. My background, I've been in the software industry for over 20 years, helping organizations apply data analytics to transform the way they work, from supply chain management to corporate performance management. Think of operations and finance. I've seen data analytics unlock business value at the intersection of people, process, and technology. I joined Skan last month to help organizations take this to the next level in this emerging category of process intelligence. Think of that as a non-disruptive approach to creating a reliable, secure, high-fidelity digital foundation for automation, transformation, and continuous improvement. It's a pleasure to be here. Back to you, Jordan.
Thank you. So I'm going to quickly we're going to move on to the poll results of the first question. But before we do that, I want to just remind people that they can either vote in the poll by clicking the biggest challenge that they're facing right now, or they can comment in the Q&A box about a challenge if they really don't see one of these there. What I would love to know as well, though, is kind of, I think, why this question is, if they were to bet on which session was which challenge, where would they think it is versus what, we'll have a look at the results in a second while we wait for people to cast their vote. Tony, where do you think that people are going to have the biggest challenge?
Yeah, based on my experience, I think it's really all of the above. That's what I would expect. Each one of these dimensions is critical. You mentioned creating a sustainable culture. I think all three of them are really critical for sustaining a culture of continuous improvement. So that's where I would put my bet.
I think that's a
I'd hate to influence the response, by the way.
Oh, that's true. Actually, I didn't think of that. Let's have a quick look now and see what the results say, and then I'd love to get Bojan's thoughts. You were winner. So yes, I would say it is interesting though that if there was a leader, I would say workforce and process, but barely. You're right, all of the above. And I think people, process, and technology is definitely one of those balances. It's those levers that are very difficult to get right and to control. And so I would love to know your thoughts, Bojan, on what you see there.
So I was expecting all of the above. I'm kind of curious of the folks that said none of the above. I cannot see if they put any comments in there, but I was expecting workforce or the people side to be probably higher than process because people are more unpredictable than process. So I'm kind of surprised that they're both at 13.3%.
Absolutely. I would love to know as well how you're using digital tools in your environment in order to support CI.
Tony, do you want to go first or do you want me?
Why don't you go first, Bojan?
Okay, so I will go back to a time when I was at a utility company, and as you know, big component of the continuous improvement is the feedback loop, and a few decades ago we used to have the metal boxes strategically placed throughout the facilities, and people could put their comments in there and then would hope that somebody's gonna go through them and figure out what they meant and do something about it. This decided to modernize that, and they used the Spigot platform for the crowdsourcing initiative, which can be used for the feedback, and I actually did use it as a feedback loop in other organizations. The basic idea is everything's now digital. You have the interface, modern interface. You have the ability to submit anything from suggestions to concerns to improvement ideas, anything and anything, depending how you structure these challenges or sessions. And then the beauty of these digital tools is the visibility that you get throughout the process. So you can see where your ideas are. People can vote on them. They can give them star comments. Some better tools would have the graphical interfaces that will show you what are the most popular ideas. And then as you progress through the challenge, you set the thresholds on how you go to the next level. And then you reduce, obviously, number of those suggestions or ideas, and then eventually you get the winners with appropriate rewards or recognition system put in place. And then the beauty starts from there, really, because then you can track those ideas, you can assign budgets, you can see what's the current status. In some more progressive companies, they would actually try to assign the person who submitted the idea to be part of the execution team and bring it to reality. So by either way of secondment or some other creative ways. So I wanted to kind of bring that usage of the crowdsourcing and innovation systems into the continuous improvement tunnel and use it in such a way.
Tony, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well.
Sure, I think Bojan raises a great example. Collecting feedback from process operators, from owners on improvement recommendations. Crowdsourcing has been successfully used in a range of practices. I've seen For instance, in forecasting medium-term trends, such as the likelihood of a recession. Some companies are using it for demand forecasting. We do need to be careful, though, to avoid what some people call social bias. They call it the bias of conformity, and that's the desire of people to conform to group behaviors. Now, that can be addressed and mitigated through various anonymity techniques. But it does underscore the importance of using real-time granular process data to complement crowdsourcing. So, coming from Skan, or a software provider, we would recommend using crowdsourcing to complement more detailed process understanding. So if you're already using digital tools to monitor key processes in a reliable, granular way, then combining crowdsourcing data with process data can create additional insights on where to prioritize next. I think it's a really novel idea, but we do have to make sure that we're mitigating any potential biases.
So we talked a little bit about how crowdsourcing can be complemented by digital tools, and I'm curious, Tony, from your perspective, how continuous improvement on a broader scale as a methodology and those process tools make such a good match in your eyes.
Yeah. In our experience, continuous improvements really requires what I've been referring to as a reliable, detailed understanding of existing processes. And to establish this, frankly, practitioners need to stop wasting time with manual observations, right? This approach can take a long time. It consumes valuable resources, both from the process excellence or automation team, as well as the operators themselves. This can be very disruptive to the work being done. It's expensive and time consuming. And now with the pandemic largely behind us, many teams are back to traveling to various sites with their stopwatches and notepads, interviewing operators on site to document existing processes from then, which to identify and prioritize improvement initiatives going forward. Furthermore, on this topic of bias, we really have to try to mitigate biases that are rampant in manual, observation methods, right? There are probably at least three forms of biases: cognitive, social, and motivational. Cognitive bias is about a failure to process information logically. An example might be anchoring bias, which is the tendency to make judgments with a reference to a benchmark. So for instance, if an operator knows what the standard process is, then will describe their work based on that benchmark and ignore all the activities they perform that are outside of that standard. Ease of recall bias overestimates the impact of events that are easy to recall. So an operator that does admit to activities outside the standard, so let's call it the happy path, may only describe those activities that are easy to recall, but ignore all those other non-standard activities. And the transformation team is susceptible to bias as well, confirmation bias, the tendency to seek evidence which confirms beliefs and ignores evidence that doesn't. So a green belt who already believes that there exists a set of non-standard activities then will actively hunt for data to justify that or support that, and it will ignore other data and then may stop once they've found evidence of that non-standard activity. So, we talked about conformity bias, the tendency for people to want to conform to the rest of the operators. So maybe the operators will simply focus on the standard process and not rock the boat. Motivational bias is about the reward system. Operators are rewarded for following the standard process, and then in interviews, they will focus on the standard process and leave out the non-standard activity. So digital tools can add a lot of value in establishing a reliable, granular view of existing processes, right? Reduce time, effort, and bias. And then, once that foundation has been established, then, traditional process mining tools might be used, but they largely are unable to create the kind of fidelity that we need, right? They integrate into backend log files and record committed status of work, but are not able to capture all the activities. For example, activities involving software that don't create logs, such as office productivity tools. So process intelligence is really, on the other hand, is able to capture all of the human digital interactions, think of them as digital footprints, and then connect these activities into an end-to-end process. So this provides both the high fidelity and the end-to-end process mapping that we need. I think in the abstract, we call it telemetry of work. I think that's a great way of thinking about it. Some people call it the digital signature of work. Some people simply call this the digital twin of work. For example, one organization that we work with, they're a provider of curated data. They use process intelligence to uncover non-standard activities related to onboarding new suppliers of data. So initially, what happens is a spreadsheet is sent to a supplier who then fills out the spreadsheet, then a macro converts that into a PDF. Sometimes that fails because they're not using maybe a Windows PC, they're using a Mac. They then return the PDF that's re-keystroked back into a spreadsheet and then has to be adjusted one more time to fit into their ERP format. So this is performed for every supplier. They have over 5,000 suppliers they onboard every year. So this entire sequence of activities is undocumented and would not be caught in manual discovery methods or in traditional process mining, but is discovered with process intelligence. And they were able to save over $100,000. Think of all the hundreds of similar non-standard activities across thousands of operators that you can address with a clear picture of your current process. So then once that's established, then an analytic layer on top of this foundation is used to measure and monitor work activities, as well as process metrics such as turnaround time, process time, and then finally to monitor technology usage, right? What % of time is being used on core applications versus non-core applications. Process intelligence can then provide what-if analysis capabilities and the ability to kind of project or forecast key metrics based on that reliable digital twin. For instance, what would happen if we could improve the productivity of our weakest worker for this process to match the productivity of our most productive workers? We could do a what-if, for example. And then finally, from a continuous improvement perspective, you really need analytics to measure both the operational performance, project the future outcomes of different scenarios, to prioritize those improvement opportunities along key dimensions, maybe around dimensions of complexity, as well as expected savings. So we believe that you must establish a strong digital foundation. Then you have to take advantage of analytic capabilities to project the outcomes and then identify improvement opportunities that are an optimal balance of complexity and savings.
Bojan, so that was very, very thorough, Tony. Thank you for kind of guiding us through the ways in which humans demonstrate biases and the ways in which process tools can kind of circumnavigate that. I loved your thoughts on that idea of the digital twins and the telemetry of work. I definitely, I think that's so fascinating. Bojan, I'd love to hear if that reflects your experience as well.
Yes, it does. I think what Tony described was a kind of advanced to these systems that I used to work with. I haven't seen Skan in action yet. I hope to do that soon. But yes, the regular systems can only see so much. That's why we still use the observation methods, manual ones. But this sounds like a pretty cool invention in the process mining field. So I can't wait to see the full functionality of it.
Absolutely. And Bojan, I'd also love to know as well, what has been your biggest challenge in getting process tools to be used in a continuous improvement context?
So for this particular crowdsourcing example I gave you earlier, it's really how do you harness all the support system to get to the end result. So some people tend to think it's super easy just to set up the challenge and it's going to run itself, which is very far from the truth. You need to have the administrator in place. You need to have the subject matter experts in place to review those results. As Tony was saying, this whole bias on the popularity bias. Some people could write any sort of idea, and if they know half the company, they're going to get a ton of likes. And somebody who's a silent genius sitting somewhere in the corner, might have an excellent idea that's not going to get too much popularity traction because the system is set up by comments and votes. And you need this expert to actually really read through it and understand what the person meant, potentially go and reach out to them and get the clarifications. But that could be the real gem that's going to set the company on a new path for the future to beat the competition. So it is the active management of this whole process that can be really tricky and could, if not attended to, can really grind the whole challenge to a halt.
Absolutely. And Tony, does this reflect your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the only thing I would add is that, companies, organizations that are using traditional process mining tools, one of the biggest challenges is simply all the integrations required to access those back-end logs, right? That takes time, is disruptive, does not provide the level of granularity that's needed. And so, there's an emerging set of capabilities, which we call process intelligence, which really addresses these challenges, right? So it's non-disruptive, does not require back-end log integration, and yet also provides deep granularity across the entire end-to-end process. So those are some of the experiences that we've had.
I also want to know as well, we kind of ran that poll at the beginning of the session, and you were correct in saying that it's always going to be that finer balance of people, process, and technologies. I would love to know from your perspective how kind of these tools fit into CI in practice in order to better balance these kind of levers.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. We believe strongly, it's our strong point of view that, bringing together, orchestrating people, process, and technology, and coordinating those levers are foundational to continuous improvement. And so, once you establish a reliable, high-fidelity digital foundation, then the analytics on top of that can help you monitor worker productivity. So you can compare, top performers with bottom performers and look in detail at what are the set of activities that distinguish these two. And probably that'll identify opportunities for training. Maybe the bottom performers have only been on the team for a couple of months. They haven't been ramped up properly enough, and they need additional training on a sequence of process steps that they take that the top performers don't take. Or maybe it's something as simple as giving them access control to some aspect of the software, or maybe automating a particular step. And then from a process perspective, looking at end-to-end processes and comparing process variants, right? These are a group of process, this is a variant that has, significantly different cycle time than this other process variant, and therefore being able to identify areas for standardization and automation. And then finally, technology usage, analyzing non-core application usage versus core application usage to identify automation opportunities to reduce the amount of time spent on non-core applications. Furthermore, process intelligence can generate automatability insights, right? What do we do next in terms of automation? So there are algorithms that are used to score processes and sub-processes for complexity, looking at measures of, say, cognitive complexity or manual effort or workflow simplicity. The less complex and the more manual a task, the more suitable it might be for automation. Then on the benefit side, helping estimate based on quantifying value levers such as labor rates, right? And so the combination of complexity and benefits can be used to automatically identify and prioritize potential automation targets. This can provide, a fast start, think of it as a baseline, to help the process and transformation teams analyze and target CI projects more effectively.
I definitely think that it is that, I definitely see as these RPA, for example, is such a key automation tool that's being used in order to automate those administrative core functions that are, or non-core functions that aren't as high skilled. And so I definitely see how that comes into play and becomes such a key focus of continuous improvement as well, because it enables that continued high level focus on the improvement of processes and the refinement of processes. I'm going to quickly talk about, put the next poll up and then ask Bojan a question. So this is our second poll of the day. For those of you who are interested in being eligible for CPEs, they must vote in this poll, but for those of you who are interested in understanding what their peers are doing, this is also a valuable opportunity to vote in the polls. It's multi-answer, which means that you can pick more than one. As always, you're more than welcome to comment in the Q&A box as well to share your thoughts. But Bojan, I would love to know, a couple of our commenters here have mentioned that, identifying leadership, opportunities for leadership is one of the key workforce challenges that they've noted. That's one of the key challenges that they've had. And so I would love to know how you've encouraged employees, with particular reference to senior leadership, to take advantage of process tools in order to make CI kind of embedded into company culture and to take advantage of that workforce lever we've been kind of mentioning.
Mm-hmm. So I think it all starts with the culture of continuous improvement, and how do you set up that culture that people feel encouraged and valued for taking the risks, that there's no repercussions or reprimands if there's no stupid question. So how do you encourage everybody to participate, to put in ideas? How do you take those ideas? So going back to the whole visibility, if you run tools like Excel and then it almost becomes like a black hole without good communication afterwards. That's why the crowdsourcing tools with the pipeline visibility or the life cycle visibility can bring a whole new difference to this challenge. And okay, I submitted my suggestion. What happens next? You can see how it's going through the different thresholds, gates, and then if it's going through production or if it has been killed due to whichever reason, and the reason should be known to you so that you can fine-tune your suggestion ability and improvement abilities. So I found those to be invaluable. Like the whole communication and culture is always upfront with any sort of continuous improvement initiatives. In terms of leadership, it's a kind of different challenge that if you want the successful, as they call it, challenge in the crowdsourcing, you need to have a strong sponsor as high as possible in the organization who's active and visible and promoting the challenge and encouraging participation of his direct reports, and then it cascades down throughout the other levels. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you. Tony, do you have anything to supplement before we look at the results of this poll?
Well, the other thing I would add, I think those are great points that Bojan raised, is, the reality is that business leaders and transformation leaders are today already under tremendous pressure to meet top-down targets, for example, for cost savings. And yet they struggle to hire people, right? So digital tools is a way to unblock this logjam, right? To unlock the capacity of process and transformation teams to focus on higher value activities, such as, creating new insights on how to improve existing work versus traveling around with stopwatches and notepads conducting manual observations. So let's not forget that, we're all under pressure to meet top-down targets. And so we need digital tools to unlock the capacity of our teams.
I think that that's a fantastic summarizing statement. Let's have a look at the results as well. So I think that it's very interesting to note that 55% of our attendees are using digital solutions to implement the improvements of to drive process improvement. So if I was to make a guess, I would say that's about like RPA and automating those areas that they've identified to need process improvements. But I think it's also very interesting to note that they're potentially using tools like process mining, task mining, process discovery to identify improvement opportunities. This is my superficial interpretation, but I would love to get the expert's opinion. Tony, what are you reading into this survey result?
Yeah, I think that is good news. 70% are using digital tools, 30% are not, right? So 30% are still, trapped in manual processes that trap our capacity, the capacity of the transformation teams and the capacity of, frankly, of the operators. And so I think it is, I think you're right. I would assume the 55% is about RPA. So that's important. And, we believe that process intelligence capabilities feed RPA reliably and effectively and necessarily. So.
Absolutely. Bojan, I'd love to get your thoughts as well on the results.
I would concur with Tony that it's interesting that such a high percentage are not using digital tools in today's day and age. And I think the guest is right with implementing the improvements, potentially identifying them too. I was expecting that to be a little bit higher. And I was a little bit surprised with measuring the impact of improvements is only 30%. I was expecting that to be higher.
I totally agree. I mean, in our closing takeaways, Bojan, do you have, for looking at the results, what is your advice to our attendees based off of where they're currently focused their digital tools? What would be your advice?
Well, I guess the focus would be on the 30% of folks, or 27% of folks who are not using it to explore the landscape and see what's out there and really explore. They don't know what they don't know. And I'll leave it with that.
They don't. Yes, I agree. Tony, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, to the 30% that are not using digital tools, I would say simply stop, manual observations. But then to the 70% that are, I would say make sure that you're building a reliable, highly granular digital twin of your existing processes. Don't settle for high-level process, let's call it maps from traditional process mining tools. You need much higher levels of granularity to cope with all the variability in business today. And then finally, as you look at future improvement opportunities, make sure that you're orchestrating people, process, and technology using your digital solutions, because that's critical for sustaining continuous improvement.
Thank you so much, both of you. I think that these are really valuable insights. I think that the attendees who shared their thoughts in polls and Q&A have absolutely enriched the conversation. So thank you so much for your time. As I mentioned at the beginning of this session, there are digital resources available to supplement the learning that we had today. And if you're interested in connecting with Bojan or Tony, their LinkedIns are available on the top right-hand side of the screen. If you're interested in joining us for our next session, it's going to be looking at how you can take your CI strategy to the next level with industry benchmarking from the top 20 most admired SSOs in the world. So do join us for that. You can do so by clicking the green next session button widget that is jumping up and down at the bottom of your screen right now, most likely. But otherwise, thank you again, Tony, Bojan. You're more than welcome back. This has been a fantastically engaging session.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Bye now.